Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Auburn Undercover podcast. Christian Clemente here, joined by Jason Caldwell, live on the Auburn Undercover YouTube channel. I believe live on the Auburn Undercover Facebook as well, although there were some issues there. So welcome in everybody that's already in the chat. There were plenty of people that were here early. Kevin Barnes starting things off very strong, mentioning the tuna sandwich that I had yesterday. For those that did not pay attention in the live thread. We got Jersey Mike's, and Jersey Mike's actually got me sick the weekend before, so I decided to get a tuna sandwich this time because I said in the thread I wanted to play things safer, although that's not how you should probably describe a tuna sandwich. No. So, yeah. So, Jason, have a decent amount of stuff to talk about. A couple things have gone down since Thursday when we were last live.
Yeah, and we thought it had a chance to be a really busy weekend, and heck, the weekend's not over with yet either. And obviously next week has a chance to be busy with Anquan Fagans and Jared Smith and others. So, it lived up to billing. Somebody asked me in my Friday mailbag, said, could this live up to fans' expectations? I said, for some fans, it's never going to be able to live up to expectations. This one did a pretty darn good job of it, though. So, just a huge weekend. They continue to put in the work, and it's showing up on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, I want to touch on that super quick before we go into the commitments and talk about all the different guys. I mean, I wrote in my three things I know story last week. I was like, the thing I said, I know that it's going to be tough to top last year, because last year you got Perry Thompson, who was a 5-star at the time, committed to Alabama to flip. You get Malcolm Simmons. DeMarcus Riddick is basically an extension of Big Cat. He does it a couple days beforehand. And then you get guys. You got a guy like DeAndre Carter to hop in, and he goes later. TJ Lindsey, same thing. So it was, how do you top flipping a 5-star from Alabama and getting Malcolm Simmons? How do you top that? Well, you turn around and you get 4 guys all right before or right as the event is beginning, and then you get another Alabama flip on top of it. We're going to work in order of how things went on Saturday. Hezekiah Harris, he was the first one to go, which was kind of fitting because he is a guy who has not missed an Auburn event in probably 2 years now, since he's been on the recruiting scene. It's a guy that Josh Aldridge absolutely loves. Same with Hugh Freeze, Jason, and now he's in the class. And I mean, number 22 player in the country. He's your elite guy in 2026, which is the number 1 class in the country now, by the way.
Yeah. Elite pass rusher, a guy that, is just really scratching the surface of what he can be as a player. But you're right. He's been a guy that's been Auburn so many times, very familiar with everything and everybody. A guy that's, originally from Anniston. So he has some connections there with, obviously Antonio Kite, and then think about Braden Joyner and Sylvester Smith. There's so many of those guys, and it has an impact on a lot of this class. When you think about a guy like Anquan Fagans, he knows those guys as well, being from the same area. And so, but Hezekiah was a good one to get started, right? Because it was, somebody jokingly said it was the worst kept secret, but he made no bones about it. Auburn's been his leader. They've been the number 1 team for a long time, and he was ready to go. And so that was a good way to kick things off.
Yeah, you go from, look, we'd love to spend a lot more time on these guys, but we have so many names to talk about, so we're going to rapid fire through this a little bit. Second up was Shadarius Toodle, a guy, Jason, who we got to see in San Antonio. Another 2026 guy. Apologies for those watching on YouTube. Little graphical error there in the bottom right. He is a 2026 guy. Really intriguing outside linebacker, and it's another quality pickup there in 26.
Yeah, you're right. We got a chance to see him in San Antonio, and you look at him length, his frame. He's a guy that's going to be a big, 230, 235 pound linebacker before he's done. And he'll be probably 220 by the time he gets done in high school, but he carries it well. Athletic, really strong family. Has all there. Dad dressed up and had a big, Auburn sport coat on, all kind of things. So, this is a guy that we've been talking to. Been talking to him really since January, and he kind of blew up as we talked about last week. And time was right for him too. He said, "I'm ready. I know where I want to go." And so these are building blocks for a 2026 class. When you talk about continuing to hammer in-state recruiting and continuing to go after the top players in Alabama, this showed up again this weekend.
Yeah, much of the exact same with the next guy that popped on Saturday, Jichael Garrett, out of Gulf Shores. LSU has been the main competition really the whole way, and he did visit LSU. Hezekiah Harris did as well. I believe Thursday night, kind of into Friday. And, I know multiple predictions went in for LSU to get his commitment. And there was some confidence there after they had pushed pretty hard to try and get him. But within a couple hours of him showing up in Auburn, he was committed to Auburn. And it was kind of something that we expected for a while. He said in the spring that he wanted to have a decision soon. Auburn had put in a ton of work here. And Jason, this is a guy who he's really fun to be around, really good kid. I mean, I even got a text from him today on Sunday. And this does not happen often, just saying, thank you for covering my process and everything, with everything through my Auburn recruitment. And I'm locked in and, ready to go. That's just kind of who Jichael Garrett is.
Yep. And another one of those guys, Calhoun County, he was originally at Oxford before moving to Gulf Shores. And so got a little pipeline coming from the Calhoun County areas and all that group. And so we saw this guy last year in the state championship game, and he walks on the field and immediately you go, that's an SEC guy. It didn't take long. And so, man, I think about the put together group of like 25, interior defensive line. And then this group of, with Hezekiah at edge and still got Tank out there at edge. I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute, but these two commitments at linebacker, and man, that's a strong, when you think about the future of Auburn's front seven on defense, that's pretty darn strong. And every one of those guys are from in-state. And hey, they talked about it. Look, we want to make recruiting in the state of Alabama a priority. They have done it. And boy, the 25 and 20, I mean, heck, last year, 24 class, these first classes that they're full classes of Hugh Freeze and this staff, they have gone out and just, man, they have just, I don't want to say dominated because, Alabama's still Alabama. They will get some players, but man, they've gone out and recruited the state of Alabama unlike they've done in a long time. And that's really the recipe for successful Auburn football teams, in my lifetime. They've been built around kids from Alabama and Georgia, kids that invest in knowing how important those rivalry games are and knowing how important it is for this fan base because they've been to camp. Jichael Garrett's another one of those guys that understands that. And man, those are guys that get you excited when you think about the future of what this team and this defense can look like.
Yeah, before we touch on Blake Woodby, I mean, you mentioned the state of Alabama. In the 25 class, the top 10 players in the state of Alabama were all in Auburn on Saturday. Neem Offord, Jared Smith, Malik Autry, J.J. Falk, Eric Winters, Zion Grady, Derek Smith, Jordan Crawford, Anquan Fagans, Antonio Coleman. Every single one of the top 10 players was in Auburn. We think that Auburn sits in a good spot to get commitments from Fagans and Jared Smith this week with their decisions. And we also think Auburn sits in a good spot to potentially flip Derek Smith. Think something could maybe happen there, and we'll touch on him more later. But if you do that, you could be in a spot where not only did you have all 10 on campus on Saturday, you could have 8 of those guys committed, and the other 2 are committed to Ohio State. So it's crazy.
It is.
Not in the state of Alabama, pretty far away, actually. Blake Woodby, St. Francis Academy, a guy who was on campus 3 times already this year, back for Big Cat Weekend. I mean, you mentioned Hezekiah Harris, poorly kept secret. Blake Woodby, not really much of a secret going into the weekend. Figured he would be a guy that pops, figured he'd be a guy that would pop early. And he was the guy that kind of got the event truly started. All those other guys that committed in the 2026 class did things before the event actually even got going. I mean, Auburn had 3 commitments before they technically started the event. And then Blake would be there on the indoor facility. We got to see it on Instagram Live. On the indoor facility, took the mic from Hugh Freeze, talked for a little bit, and then announced he was committed to Auburn and gave the mic back to Hugh a little bit. But Jason, a guy that's extremely fast, not necessarily the biggest, but I loved your player comparison for him.
Yeah. He looks like a lot like Roger McCreary did coming in high school. Roger, a guy that can run, wasn't the 6'2" big corner, but had some length. But you looked at him and you go, man, that guy's just a football player. That's what I think about when I watch Blake Woodby play. He's not a small guy, 5'10" and a half, 175. Probably played, Roger was a guy that played at 185, maybe 190 by the time he was done. But I think, not afraid to get up and be physical, not afraid to play close to the line of scrimmage, can take on bigger wide receivers. But you're right, can really run. Just another solid addition to this group. And I mean, the guy that, again, another 4-star guy, that adds to this defensive talent pool that they're building in that 25 class, and obviously starting 26 as well. When there's no secret to being a top-notch football program, no secret to winning a bunch of football games. The more good players you have, the better chance you have to be successful. Doesn't always guarantee it, but the more of those guys you got, the better chance you have. And this staff understands that.
Yeah, and then Jason, the nightcap, Antonio Coleman. It was, we were all kind of theorizing a little bit. We were kind of thinking, you got the 3 early commitments. The pool party ended up getting canceled because of a thunderstorm, so that changed some things a little bit. But we're kind of thinking, would Auburn have used its last piece there with Woodby right as the event is starting? Because it's not like that's a really bad day. Like, that's still a really good day with those 4. But it kind of feels like you still want one more. You don't want to just end the day at 12:30 in terms of the news out there in the cycle. So we kind of thought Auburn still had another trick up its sleeve. And there were 2 different guys that we were watching closely, both committed to Alabama. And it turns out it's Antonio Coleman, who it's been a roller coaster to say the least. Commits to Alabama in September, flips to Auburn in December, flips back to Alabama in March, flips back to Auburn in July.
Yeah, and immediately when it comes across, I pick up the phone and call him, and he answered the phone, and I was like, well, and he goes, well, you knew I was going to do something. I'm like, well, that'd been great if you would have given us a little bit more of a heads up. But he was in the middle of something. I don't know if he was on his way home or something, but so never have gotten a chance to connect back with him again. But this is a guy we love, both of us. He is a dominating player inside, and my player comparison probably changes a little bit, because player comparison from last year was a Dontavius Russell. And Dontavius is a really good player for Auburn. He played as a freshman, started a ton of games for the Tigers, and was a really good player inside. Antonio Coleman shows up this weekend. He looks like a different guy. He's down to like 270, 275, a guy that I think is going to play, probably inside, in a 4-man front, but probably in a 3-man front at times. Probably end up being a 285-pound guy, but he is explosive, quick, heavy-handed, gets off blocks. I mean, he is a playmaker. And so this is one of those guys that I think the first time we watched them, obviously Ryan Williams, everybody was like, everybody gravitates to Ryan Williams, and you look up and you go, that dude in the middle is killing people. And so I think great addition. When you think about Malik Autry and Jordan Crawford and now Antonio Coleman, and that's a strong group and 3 different types of guys. Coleman's a guy that can do a little bit of both. Malik Autry probably has the highest ceiling of the bunch because of his frame, long body, and big body. And then Jordan Crawford is just a brute. I mean, he's just a bull inside. So you got 3 different types of, I think, a really, really good defensive line class right there for Coach Vontrell, who we had on our video series last week. Pretty good timing to see him pull off another one.
Yeah, and I mean, look, everyone kind of knew going into it, how long is this game going to continue on? How long is Auburn going to keep playing it? Alabama obviously held his commitment, so they're going to keep holding on to his commitment. But how long is Auburn going to keep this thing going? Are they going to keep pushing all the way to signing day? How long will it go? And the word that we kind of got was, it's a little bit of now or never going into Big Cat weekend. And I wrote that in my confidential earlier, in the sense that, look, we're bringing him back for Big Cat weekend. He obviously officially visited in June, but we might be giving this one last squeeze to try and get the juice out of it and try and get Antonio Coleman back. But from there, we might have to move on, because it's kind of gone back and forth so many times. But now you've got him back in the class, and what you touched on at the end is what sticks out to me so much about this haul. And I was talking about it last week with Cooper Patagna when he joined the podcast, was Malik Autry and Jordan Crawford are already such a fun pairing, those two, and how you can interchange them. Then you add a guy like Antonio Coleman, and you have so many different options up front there. You talk about some guys that you got even in the 24 class with guys like Joe Phillips, Jamonte Waller coming off the edge. These guys will be coming in when Keldrick Falk is a junior. You're building up a really, really strong defensive front there. And Antonio Coleman is the latest piece.
Yeah, Malik Blockton, TJ Lindsey, you mentioned, Morris Williams. I mean, yes. All of a sudden you start to look at a group of guys going, hey, interchangeable, rotate, keep guys fresh, and everybody who sticks out there is a talented guy. That's how you. And I heard Rick Neuheisel talk about it, and I think I mentioned this. But he's talking about the difference. He's like, he remember going to watch those Alabama teams, and they had 10 or 12 defensive linemen that he had. He said, I wish I'd had 2 of, and this was when he was UCLA. That's what this group has potential to be. When you look out there and go, and there's 10 or 12 guys that have the potential to be, NFL type guys. That's what you have to go and handle business in the trenches and make your defense better. And Auburn is on their way to having those types of players in abundance to give you the depth that you got to have.
I think that perfectly segues us to who we should talk about next, and that's Jared Smith, the 5-star edge rusher out of Thompson, who was back, rolled up in fashion, to say the least. That went kind of viral on Twitter a little bit yesterday, rolling up in the Tesla Cybertruck. But he shows up, and he's exactly a week away from his planned decision on August 3rd. He said that he has no idea kind of where he's leaning right now. We think Auburn sits in a good spot to get his commitment when he does ultimately make that decision on the 3rd, battling some other schools there. But it just feels like, especially after Big Cat, and we got to see him. He's a guy who he always has some fun. He was having a lot of fun. When we saw him, he was having a lot of fun. He was smiling. He was really happy. He was enjoying himself. And he would be another guy coming off the edge there. He's, we've talked about it. He's similar body size a little bit to Keldrick Falk. Don't know if he's ever going to grow weight-wise to what Keldrick is. He has enough twitch where he can probably stay as an edge rusher at that buck linebacker spot pretty much the whole time.
You're right. I thought I saw him more relaxed, Jared Smith, than we've seen. And we've been around him a bunch. We watched him play basketball and football a few times. He looked like a guy that was comfortable. And you think about it, we mentioned the word upside with Malik Autry, and I think about the word upside with Jared Smith. I think he's a guy that has potential to be a dominant player. Kind of a sneak peek maybe for this one for the old school Auburn fans. If Auburn were to land him, a player comparison for me might be Brian Smith, and I'm going back to dating myself a little bit, but Brian Smith,
I have no idea who that is.
Brian Smith was a 6'6", 255-pound outside linebacker defensive end on those late 80s, defenses. And they had different types of players where it was Craig Ogletree was a little more of a speed guy. Brian Smith was a guy that you looked at him and went, man, that guy could play power forward in an instant. That's what Jared Smith was. And he was so athletic, and he was a guy that had all those tools and had some big games at Auburn. But I think about that. I think about a guy you go, man, like the athleticism is overwhelming. You start walking guys off the bus. I think about Jared Smith in 3 years. That's a guy you walk off the bus first and go, hey, here's what we got to play with. Would be a huge addition for Auburn if they could land him here in about a week.
Yeah, and then we should also touch on as well on Sunday. Auburn gets a punter commitment from John Allen McGuire, sticking up there at Thompson, building that Thompson pipeline up a little bit. Ranked by Kohl's, who anytime you tweet or mention Kohl's, people think of the store. It's not Kohl's clothing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Kohl's kicking service, and they are the ones that nationally do the kicker punter rankings. They do that 24/7. Rivals on 3 does not really do rankings for those guys. These guys hold specialty camps and all that stuff. And McGuire can kick field goals. He's ranked as like the number 20 kicker or something like that, but he's the number 2 punter in the country. And that's what Auburn is bringing him in to do, because Oscar Chapman will be a senior this fall, Jason.
Another guy we've seen a bunch of. Obviously, when you're in this state and you cover recruiting, you end up watching Thompson, 2 or 3 times a year. So we've seen him kick really the last couple of years, and started punting really more last season than we've seen him. We went out there for spring practice and watched Thompson, and we were both like blown away at how well he was punting the football. I mean, you could see the difference. He's punting the ball across the field, because a lot of times even in spring practices, you're not punting the ball the length of the field because you got offense, defense. So a lot of times the kickers will kick across the field sideways. Well, he's punting the ball from one sideline into the stands on the other side of the field. And we're like, holy cow, he's really gotten better. He's always had a strong leg, and he can bomb it. But obviously Auburn, guy, his brother Evan McGuire was a walk-on kicker for the Tigers, and we saw him. And when we did, he wore an Auburn towel pretty much every time we saw him kick or punt. at Thompson. So, yeah, never a bad idea to get players from that program, considering the winning and consistent winning that they've done, and to keep the next group of guys going, hey, I need to look at Auburn because all my guys are down there. You look back in a few years and, walk on Sawyer Pate, maybe one of the guys that you start going, hey, that guy might have started it all to start to open up the doors a little bit. But I do think there's no coincidence that Hugh Freeze and Mark Freeman, who's Thompson's head coach, have known each other for a long time. They're very similar offensive guys. They have talked in the past and kind of keep in touch. I don't think there's any question that having that ability to go in and talk and trust between two guys has helped Auburn, get that foot in the door at Thompson.
Yes, and the addition of Charles Kelly this fall helps quite a bit as well. Or not this fall. Why did I say this fall? This past year. Jason, we have about a million different ways where we could go from here, because we were just touching on the commitments and we touched on Jared Smith being next. There's a lot of different guys that could also be next. We were just touching, let's stay at Thompson and let's go Anquan Fagans, and then we'll go to Derek Smith. Just because we were just talking about Thompson. So New Boy Fagans, he will be committed by this time in 24 hours. Auburn, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, Alabama are all in the mix. But we've really thought, dating all the way back to January, that Auburn sits in a good spot, have maintained that. Charles Kelly was a big reason why. Adding his older brother, Antoine, as a preferred walk-on, another big reason why. And he was back for Big Cat and having a good time.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many connections for this one that make you feel like Auburn is the team to beat. His older brother being one, Charles Kelly being one. Charles Kelly has recruited all his older brothers, has known the family for a long time, and so that's a strong bond together. And we mentioned the Calhoun County kind of pipeline. Well, you also have Caleb Harris, who was his safety running mate last year at Thompson. That's a true freshman, already on campus. They'll be playing for the Tigers. Then you mentioned Sylvester Smith. Those guys have known each other for a long, long time. Braden Joyner, Antonio Kite. There are a lot of guys that he is familiar with, that he's known and has built trust with. And so I think when you look at it, I think there's a lot of things that point Auburn's way, but this is a guy that's been recruited as hard as anybody in the country for, really since he was a freshman in high school. So you're going to have to beat a lot of really good programs to get New Boy.
And then we're going to talk about, let's go Derek Smith, where you only have one program to beat. Now, it's a big one. It's Alabama. That's where he's been committed since the spring. But Derek Smith was back on Saturday, got there a little bit late, missed the scavenger hunt, I think, for the most part. But it also kind of provided him an opportunity to get more one-on-one time with the coaches, which is usually not what Big Cat is necessarily about. Big Cat is the big group setting, the families, the coaches' families, everyone all hanging out. Because Derek did get there late, he was, believed, the last one to leave. So spent a lot of time with Marcus Davis, spent a lot of time with Charles Kelly. Both of those guys are recruiting him. The interesting kind of twist that's been in his recruitment has been Alabama has him committed as a safety. Auburn's been recruiting him as a wide receiver, although I do think that they think that he could play either side of the ball, and we'll probably have that opportunity if he does end up at Auburn. And Jason, we think that Auburn's in a good spot. Now, is anything imminent as of right now? We don't have anything circled in terms of a date or a time or anything like that, but we do think Auburn is definitely trending very positively in the right direction to maybe get something done here within the next week or so. We do think that's certainly possible.
Yeah, it's one of those where, heck, it could happen in the next 5 minutes while we're on this show.
Yes.
You're right. It could happen, and we feel like Auburn's in a good spot, but it also kind of feels like that every day that you pass the visit and it doesn't happen, that it becomes a little tougher. Now, who knows? I do think Auburn has continued to recruit him hard. Can you get over the finish line? That'll be the question now. I don't think there's any question that Auburn has recruited him hard. Marcus Davis has made him a priority since he arrived, so they've been recruiting him for a long time. Got some connections here too. Jeremiah Wright's a guy that's related, and so they spend a lot of time together. Again, a lot of things pointing Auburn's way, but when you're recruiting against Alabama in the state of Alabama, you got to get to the finish line. And just like with Antonio Coleman, that'll mean you got to get to December. But this one, can you get this this initial one to get him on your side and to kind of keep him coming back. I do think it's close, but again, close. We'll see how close and if they can get to the next push.
Another guy that we're watching, he was back on Saturday. We did not get a chance to talk with him, but former commit Tyler Lockard, we highlighted him on Thursday when we did our show as an interesting name to watch. Look, anytime a guy decommits but still ends up back on campus, that's pretty telling. And we had reported that was not a commitment that Auburn wanted to lose. When Carday Smith decommitted, I guess maybe it was a couple days before Lockard or a couple days after. I don't remember the timing there. Auburn was, they were okay moving on there along the offensive line. They were not okay losing Tyler Lockard. And that's clear because he was back for Big Cat and they invited him and they wanted him there. And now we'll see what happens there. That is a guy that they definitely want back in the class.
Correct. I think, look, and there's some connections there, obviously being from Mississippi and a lot of Mississippi connections on this staff and Derek Nix and others. And, then, DJ Durkin coming in is a guy that's recruited him. So, no, that's definitely not a guy they wanted to lose. They would love to get back. And again, you're right. We talked about it. Getting him back on campus is going to be a big step because it is hard to get a guy back when he's committed, decommitted. But we also saw a guy that's now done it twice and recommitted again. So we'll see. I think, again, we know that once you get a guy back on campus and he takes part in things, that you put yourself back in the hunt. And I think for maybe a few weeks, Auburn people and maybe a lot of other people said, well, that's probably it for Auburn's chances. I think now we go, hey, Auburn's back in it and got a shot again.
Another guy that I would kind of characterize, not the same situation, but name offered, who was back for Big Cat weekend. He told us that he was going to visit Oregon. We kind of had a sneaking suspicion he would probably still end up in Auburn this weekend. Huge Auburn recruiting event. You kind of expect all the in-state guys to be there. And so Name offered, who obviously is committed to Ohio State, makes it back. The reason I compare it somewhat to Lockard is, when he committed to Ohio State back in, I believe it was February earlier this year, he didn't visit Auburn earlier in 2024. He didn't visit in January or February before it went dead. And then he didn't visit again until June for his official visit. Auburn had absolutely lost some ground there. I say that comfortably. And, the thing that we had consistently reported was you just need to keep getting him to come back. Keep chipping away slowly. It's not like you're going to flip him on the official visit. It's not like you're going to flip him when he comes back with his team for the 7-on-7 camp. It's probably not like you're going to flip him at Big Cat weekend. But you keep bringing him back, getting him to chip away a little bit on that lead that Ohio State has and see what you can do. And the message to him has been, it goes back to what we started the show with, Jason. It's the in-state guys, and they're saying, look, you're the top ranked in-state guy. So we can't let you get away. We can't let you go to Ohio State. And I don't think Auburn will not stop fighting until December. Do I think right now that Auburn gets Name offered? No. But if he shows up for 2 or 3 more games this fall and Auburn looks better on the field, which we've talked about several times, then I do think they have a really solid chance.
That's what this one feels a little bit more like to me. I think he sees everything he wants to see at Auburn, but I also think he's like, okay, I want to see it show up now on the field. And we talked about that. That's going to be important for some guys. I think he's one of those guys. If Auburn's 4-0 and you're playing Oklahoma and that place goes nuts and you're on campus, that might be a game changer. It might open some doors for him and maybe another guy, that was on campus that's committed to Ohio State. But I think there's no question. You're right. We talked to Naeem when we saw them this spring, and it felt like, man, Auburn's way out of the loop, and it's kind of Ohio State and really nobody else. That official visit, it felt like that one was one where there was some bonds built. I know him and Coach Crime are close, and Hugh Freeze, and getting him back on campus was a big deal. So I don't think this is one where you expect a flip tomorrow. This might be one where it happens in December. But Auburn's going to continue to recruit him. There's no question.
Yeah, and you mentioned Zion Grady. He was back. He's a guy that Auburn continues to recruit kind of at that buck spot. Usman Kroma, another huge guy that was there. What was really interesting to me is Florida State was trying really, really hard to get him on campus this weekend. He had already committed to go into Big Cat weekend. And so he visits Florida State on Friday. Georgia makes a big push to get him on campus for their little event on Saturday. And he says, look, guys, I'm sorry. I'm Usman might go visit Georgia over the next couple days here. But again, he sticks to his word. He says, I committed to go into Big Cat weekend. I'm going to go check out Auburn again. I want to go see those guys again. And if you're watching on YouTube, this picture of him is not a representative of Usman Koroma's personality, because he is one of the brightest, smile, laughing, fun to be around kids that we've been around. And so Big Cat weekend is kind of the perfect event for that, in terms of get him around a bunch of other guys that he knows, a bunch of other recruits, just a fun atmosphere, fun vibe. He's already experienced all the football stuff that Auburn has to offer, like meetings, stuff like that. Just get him around everybody and let him kind of relax a little bit. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. He said he's either going to commit on August 10th or he's going to wait until the middle of his season. And he has to kind of wait and see what he wants to do and see if he can make up his mind in time. But Auburn is right there up near the top for him. I mean, it's only 3 schools really in the mix, but it feels like Auburn is really vying for that number 1 spot.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think he's built a bond. He's kind of found some things that he likes about Auburn and some opportunities at Auburn. So I think that's been big for him. But yeah, you're right. A guy that you see him walking up and he starts smiling when he sees you, because he just comes over and he's gonna talk and say hey. So I think it'd be a great addition. He's a bigger, more physical back than Auburn has had recently. It would be a different kind of guy. So obviously, if you pair him with Alvin Henderson, that'd be a pretty strong duo.
Yeah. Now we have a million different 2026 names that we can touch on. We're already past 31 minutes here, so we will go quickly through some guys, and then we'll go from there. Jason, Anthony Tank Jones touched on state of Alabama guys already. He's the number 1 guy in the state of Alabama in 2026, a guy that Auburn's going to try really hard on. Jichael Garrett already said he's going to start working on him. Full court press for Anthony Jones.
Yep. St. Paul's, another Mobile guy, where Toodle's from, where Jichael Garrett's playing. That'll have an impact. Those guys talked about playing together and they know each other. So I think that's a big deal. So Auburn continues to get guys back on campus and give yourself a shot. You do that and win your fair share of them, then you're in a pretty good position.
And he is not the only 2026 5-star edge rusher that was on campus. Jordan Carter was also there from Douglas County. He's a guy who, it was interesting. He visited this spring, visited with his team. Auburn really, really likes him. And Hugh Freeze said, look, I want you to come bring your family back. Literally 9 days later, he comes back with his family in the spring to visit again. Back for Big Cat. He said Auburn's really high up there for him, up in his top group. And he doesn't think that's going to change anytime soon. Tyler Atkinson, another 5-star in 2026, the linebacker from Grayson. Look, Auburn had to really fight just to get him on campus because all these other teams were pushing really hard to get him there. He ends up visiting for Big Cat. And look, Georgia's the crystal ball favorite, and I do not disagree with that. I think Georgia is still the team to beat here, but I think Auburn's really close.
I do too. And he had his dad with him. His dad looked like he had a great time, and kind of that's an important part of this, is that it's not just a player decision; it's a family decision, and so much of that involves the families being comfortable and doing those things. And I think that's where Auburn might have made some noise this weekend with a guy like Tyler Atkinson and some of these other 26 guys.
Yeah, a guy that we both put in a crystal ball in for on Saturday, Shadarius Morgan, a guy who we have seen, I don't even want to say grow up, transform, change completely from this time last year to this year. I mean, look, he had the size last year. We knew he was big. We knew he was an interesting player, and he had a handful of offers that were intriguing, but he hadn't fully shown it on the field yet. This spring, this offseason, he has shown that he is an elite player. 24/7 Sports made him the number 20 player in the country. And, you and I, we hadn't gotten to see him when that happened. He did a Under Armour camp in Nashville, and we're like, wow, that's kind of surprising a little bit. We get to see him a few weeks later, and we're like, okay, yep, that makes sense.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah. And he was back for Big Cat, spent a lot of time with Malcolm Simmons, obviously former teammates of Benjamin Russell. Those two talk literally every single day. I think that's a factor. I think Marcus Davis is a factor. And I think you just mentioned the family feeling comfortable.
Yep.
Sedarian had the whole crew there, and everyone looked like they had a really good time.
Yeah, 35 minutes from home is a big deal. Obviously, when you start talking about, playing in college and wanting your family to be able to see you and be able to get home and see them. That's a big deal. So I think that's part of it. Yeah, I mean, I remember, Smitty Grider telling us 2 years ago when we go, he's a freshman, and we're going to see Malcolm when Malcolm had come back to Benjamin Russell after being in Georgia for a year. And he goes, hey, just wait till you see this freshman. And we saw a little bit of him then. And then last year, saw a little bit more. He's a different guy now. He is going to wreak havoc for people that play Benjamin Russell this season. And it's when you put pads on, it's going to be an impossible matchup. I mean, he's 6'4", 210, and can run, can jump, basketball background. He's going to be really fun to watch. And I felt like Auburn made a huge push, on Saturday.
I probably should have had a notepad of names that we were going to talk about because I definitely missed a 25 that we should have talked about before jumping to 26. Sam Turner.
Yeah.
Wide receiver committed to Georgia Tech out of there in Georgia. He gets offered in June. He's kind of rapidly been rising up the board a little bit. Offered in June, visits for Big Cat Weekend. Jason, you talked with him and just reading the story. I mean, he said he wants to have a decision by his senior season, getting rolling on August 8th. And reading the tea leaves a little bit, it kind of felt like Auburn was in a prime spot to pull that one off.
Yeah, a really interesting guy because he's not the blazing fast 4.3 guy, which doesn't make him a highly rated guy, but he's just a football player. I mean, he's got a good frame, 6'1", 6'2", 185-pound guy, really good ball skills, a guy that can play inside, can do just some different things. I think would be a unique add to what Auburn's already done with the fire athleticism, big fast guys, and you bring in a guy that just, hey, let's catch everything and play in the middle of the field, and that's what it feels like he is. And you talk about, hey, Auburn's going to throw the football, and that's important to him. The development of wide receivers Auburn's had, not now, but under Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss, and now making that priority at Auburn, he sees that that's going to happen here, and so I think that's a big deal as well. So you look, and it's not going to be a huge wide receiver class, not after what you did last year. But if you get a couple of really good players, and he'd be one of them, then that would set you up to go into 26 and maybe sign a bigger class next year.
Yes. Jumping back to 2026, Zealous Hicks had some of the more interesting comments of the day, the 5-star safety, originally from Parkview, now at Carrollton. Two big takeaways out of his interview, talking with him. First, there's been kind of rumors that he was going to reclassify or that he's thinking about it. He confirmed that. He confirmed that he's definitely thinking about it. He also said that Auburn's telling him that he should do it. He said that Auburn's telling him, look, you've got the size, you've got the playmaking ability. How about instead of spending another year in high school, you can come get developed, maybe redshirt or something like that in college and get developed a little bit more here. And then the other interesting thing is he said that he's really close with Eric Winters and Anquan Fagans. And he mentioned, he said, Anquan Fagans is pushing really hard for me to commit. And he's like, I don't even know why he's not committed yet.
Yeah.
Now that might change in a day or so. And look, these guys all know kind of what's happening behind the scenes a little bit, but that was a newsworthy quote from talking with Zealous Hicks. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. We were definitely keeping a close eye on him going in because he had said he wanted to have a summer decision. He said he's going to back that up now because he wants to take some more visits and see some more things. So put him on the back burner a little bit, but definitely still keep watching him. In the 2026 class, again, Jason, tight end Xavier Tiller, a guy that we saw this spring, really, really, really good tight end out of Langston Hughes. He was a guy who had a lot of fun, went into the visit thinking that Auburn was going to try and make a big push. I felt like Auburn did that and did a good enough job where I put in a crystal ball. Now, there's nothing imminent there, but I think Auburn is moving in the right direction to potentially get that one done maybe sometime this fall.
Yeah, a completely different type of player. He is more of a Rivaldo Fairweather type guy. I think more of a wide receiving tight end, but his wingspan from tip to tip is almost 7 feet. It's incredible. And his huge hands. He's not a guy that will ever play at 265, but I think he's a guy that can play at 245 and give you a really difficult matchup inside, 2 tight end sets, do some different things. Looking forward to seeing him develop and watching him grow this year for that Langston Hughes team. Obviously, we'll be over there to watch Tavares Dice, and then talented running back. There's some other guys on that team to watch as well. So looking forward to seeing him and seeing how he develops.
Yeah. So we're at the 40-minute mark. We have touched on most of the names. We could keep going for another 40 minutes plus, and there would be plenty more to talk about. I will see if there's any questions in the chat that are worth hitting on real quick that we haven't already kind of touched on. Here we go. Here's a good one from Kevin. With momentum building, what needs to happen this season? 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins, etc. Basically, what does Auburn need to get on the field to keep its recruiting not only going, but keep it from falling apart a little bit? You can't go out there and go 6-6. It's not gonna keep the class together all the way.
Yeah, it'd be tough. It's hard to put an exact number on it because you don't know ever know how it happens. If you were to go 5-0 and go, 2-5 the rest of the way, then it wouldn't feel great. If you sputter maybe early, but you go beat a Missouri on the road or do something like that, then it has a different feel. So, I mean, I think 7-5 is probably the basement of what you would want to do to build some momentum. I think it probably 8-4. Then you start to go, hey, we're getting closer. You're getting closer. So I think probably there. I think I don't know that it would fall apart even if you went 6-6, but it would make it tougher to hold on to some of those guys. Yes. So I think just continue to take steps forward, but I feel like 8-4 may unlock some things, not just hold it together. An 8-4, 9-3
yes,
would put you maybe to another level and might open up a few more doors.
I agree with that completely. If you go 6-6, you might be eliminated from the Neem offered sweepstakes or something like that. If you go 7-5, but you show a much more explosive passing attack and you show some signs of life and all your losses for the most part are close, you go to Athens and you keep it close or you don't get run out of the building, you can live with that. If you go 8-4, you can definitely live with that. And from there on up, you're definitely in a good spot. Auburn fan 123, do y'all feel confident Auburn can land one of Malachi Goodman or Andrew Babalola? I wouldn't say confident, but I would not count Auburn out from landing one of those guys. Now, Auburn's not the odds-on favorite for either one of those guys right now. Malachi Goodman, I'd pick Penn State. Babalola, probably lean Michigan, but every team there has a little bit of confidence, including Auburn. So Auburn's still chipping away. They're still trying to get one of those guys.
Yeah, I would feel maybe more Babalola, to be quite honest. I think Auburn has built a strong relationship with him. I know they stay in contact with him a pretty good bit. And so I think that's one that maybe Auburn's in a little bit more than maybe the national people might think.
The interesting thing with Babalola, talking with Cale Ellis, he said, I text Andrew every single morning. That is one of the very first things that I do. Look, if you want to talk about recruiters, Alan Henderson's a strong recruiter. Jichael Garrett will be one. Cale Ellis is hitting guys up all the time. Y'all don't always see it because y'all will, of course, for good reason, focus on what's on social media and what guys are posting there. But behind the scenes, a lot of these guys are working. And obviously that's behind the scenes. You don't get to see it. But Cale said he texts with Andrew Babalola every single day. And the same goes for the Auburn staff, of course, for that matter. Here's one from Chuck, and we'll touch on just a couple more questions, then close it out here. What would you rate the Big Cat weekend? 1 bad, 10 being best.
If as it ended, and say, look, if it gets to midnight tonight, I still give it at least an 8, probably a 9. But if you were to add potentially a Derek Smith, and you get Anquan Fagans, and you get Jared Smith, so the repercussions of Big Cat, if you get to next Saturday and you've added those guys and maybe another one, then you got to give it a 10. So I think it's 8.5, 9 right now. If you add some more of these pieces, it'd be hard for me to think it could have gone much better.
I agree completely. You're at a 9 right now, and come ask me again next Sunday, and I will probably say you're at a 10 based on what I think will happen over the next week or so. We will touch on one more question here from Aiden, because there's no way we could get out of a podcast without talking about it. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Will Auburn get a quarterback commit? Yes, I think they will. When that will happen, who that will be, don't know that exactly. But we think that Auburn gets a 2025 quarterback, Jason, and we think it will probably end up being one of Deuce Knight or KJ Lacey. Deuce Knight obviously committed to Notre Dame. KJ Lacey committed to Texas. Both Southeast guys, KJ Lacey, Saraland, Deuce Knight over at George County in Mississippi, guys that this staff, Hugh Freeze specifically, is very familiar with, spent a lot of time recruiting over the past year and a half. And we think that Auburn is in a position to get one of those guys. And personally, if I had to guess, this is a guess, I think that Auburn will have a resolution at quarterback within the next month.
Yeah, I think before you get into a season that I would feel like that Auburn will have its guy. And I think it's probably one of those two guys. Nothing's changed my opinion of that either. I still think that's where it's headed. And so that's one. Well, again, I don't know that you'll get a whole lot of resolution on that one until it happens. I don't think this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. I think if it happens, it's going to happen pretty quickly, like a Band-Aid. But here it is. And so because of that, there may not be a whole lot of advance warning.
Yes. So stay tuned to AuburnUndercover.com. We will have you covered with whatever happens at quarterback, whatever happens with Derek Smith, whatever happens with Anquan Fagans tomorrow. Jason, you're planning to be up there, up in Birmingham for that. I will be in Auburn because they will have a 5-star quarterback on campus and some other guys visiting because it never really stops. And we have plenty more coming this week as well. I still probably have 15 interviews from Big Cat Weekend I need to roll through. So, Jason, unless I'm missing anything, I think we can definitely close it out there.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on a lot. And again, that just kind of scratches the surface of what this staff has done. And I kind of wrote a little bit about that for a Monday Morning Quarterback, but the job that the staff and the support staff have done in getting Auburn to a position where they're getting top players on campus and they're getting commitments. And it's become now what you expect Auburn to be. Hats off to them. They've done a great job, and it's made our job a whole lot better and a whole lot more fun, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Credit to those guys. Obviously, the credit all goes to the coaches, but you mentioned the support staff, people like Bianca, Riley, Caitlin, A.K. Magula, Will Redmond, Kenyatta Watson. I could name off a million people. There's so many people behind the scenes that are doing logistics,
in the work,
setting up visits, all that stuff. They're putting in a ton of work behind the scenes that y'all don't always get to see. So shout out to all of them for a great Big Cat Weekend that gave us a good opportunity to provide a ton of coverage. Appreciate everyone hopping in the stream. We will see you guys again. I know probably have plans to do something before fall camp starts on Thursday.
Yeah.
With Nathan, we'll see exactly what the plan is there. And then obviously we'll have
sometime this week and then probably sometime over the weekend, depending on what happens. So,
yep. So we'll have plenty of other podcasts and stuff coming over the week, and we'll catch you guys again here soon.